Chapter 36, Universe of Stone. Now, this one I'm going to have to say Mr. H and the Nasties for a man with a moustache from Austria, etc., because there's a lot of those words in this one and the algorithms start punching me in the face. So, people will not die for business, but only for ideals. That was Mr. H in his book, Mein Kampf. Saint Germain and Jesus were not the only messiahs to appear in the 1930s, bearing promises of an imminent utopia. We got one now, Mark, in America. Sorry, but we do. Another messiah was gaining a large following in Germany. His coming was said to be the beginning of the millennium. Using one of the Brotherhood's most important symbols, the swastika, that German messiah's name was Mr. H. Mr. H, of course, was the strutting man with the toothbrush moustache who became absolute dictator of Germany and instigated World War II. Mr. H and his entourage would look comical to us today were not the consequences of their lunacy so tragic. During his young adulthood, before rising to power, Mr. H lived in Vienna. One of his friends during that period was Walter Johann Stein. During World War II, Dr. Stein became an advisor to England's Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill. Much of what Dr. Stein had to say about Mr. H's early life found its way into the book entitled Spear of Destiny by Trevor Ravenscroft. Spear of Destiny reports Mr. H had become a devotee of mysticism during his poverty-stricken days in Vienna between 1909 and 1913, when Mr. H was in his early 20s. Mr. H was convinced that he had achieved higher levels of consciousness by means of drugs. Mr. H made a penetrating study of medieval occultism and ritual magic, discussing with him, Stein, the whole span of the political, historical and philosophical reading through which he formulated what was later to become the nasty Weltanschauung, no idea, a special concept of human history. Did I say that right? Weltanschauung. There's too many U's. It's probably not right. It'll confuse the algorithms, which is what we want in this chapter. In his autobiography, Mein Kampf, Mr. H affirmed the importance of this period in shaping his ideas. Mr. H did not develop his ideology in a vacuum. One of his most influential mentors was a Viennese bookstore owner named Ernst Precht. Precht was described by Dr. Stein as a malevolent-looking man with a somewhat toad-like appearance. Precht was a devotee of the Germanic mysticism that was preaching the coming of an Aryan super-race. Mr. H frequented Precht's store and pawned books there when he needed money. During those visits, Precht indoctrinated Mr. H in Germanic mysticism and successfully encouraged Mr. H to use the hallucinogenic drug peyote as a tool for achieving mystical enlightenment. As it turns out, Precht was associated with a man named Guido von List. Von List was a founding member and leading figure in an occult lodge which used a swastika instead of a cross in its rituals. Before he was disgraced and forced to flee from Vienna, von List had gained a large audience for his Germanic mystical writings. Mr. H became a member of that audience through Precht. Back in his Viennese flophouse room, young Mr. H avidly pored through pamphlets and books expounding on the mystical destiny of Germany and the coming of the Aryan super-race. According to some of those tracts, Aryans were created by an extraterrestrial super-race. Do you think those words are going to get me done? Should I say the A word? Because we live in a free society.
I'm not sure you're going to be able to read any of the chapter really if you've got to change every word.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I'm gonna read the chapter, but I'm just gonna go careful with the words. By an extraterrestrial super race of giants. Mr. H became an ardent believer in those ideas as he hawked his watercolours on the street to support his meagre existence and to pay for his drug-induced enlightenments. The notion that Mr. H was a druggie in his youth seeking mystical enlightenment through chemicals should come as no surprise. Drugs were a major factor in shaping the persona of Mr. H. Mr. H remained a user of powerful narcotics his entire life. According to the diaries of his personal physician, Dr. Theodore Morell, which surfaced in the US National Archives, the German dictator was repeatedly injected with various painkillers, sedatives, strychnine, cocaine, a morphine derivative, and other drugs during the entire 4 years of World War II. The mystical philosophy so eagerly adopted by the young Mr. H was the same one which had already deeply affected the Kaiser and other German leaders. In fact, Houston Stewart Chamberlain, the mystic who had so influenced the Kaiser years later, declared Mr. H to be the prophesied German Messiah. Well, September the 25, 1925, the nasty newspaper Vulture Beobacter, don't know, celebrated Chamberlain's 17th birthday and declared his work, Foundations of the 12th Century, to be the gospel of the nasty movement. As we recall, the Kaiser considered the same book to have been sent by God. Mr. H's road to politics began as a German soldier during World War One. When that war broke out, Mr. H enlisted. He remained very concerned about the mystical destiny of Germany and continued to ponder the A question. I'm going to say A for I just am. While fighting in the fields. This made him very unpopular with his fellow soldiers, who were more concerned with food, leave, women, and an end to the war, which nearly all of them detested. Mr. H, on the other hand, flourished in the war-torn environment and distinguished himself as a soldier. He won the highest award a soldier of his rank corporal could earn, the Iron Cross, First Class. About 2 months after winning the Iron Cross, Mr. H was blinded by mustard gas during a battle. He was taken to the Pacewalk Military Hospital in northern Germany, where he was mistakenly diagnosed as suffering from psychopathic hysteria. The symptoms were probably caused by the mustard gas. Mr. H was consequently placed under the care of a psychiatrist, Dr. Edmund Forster. What exactly was done to Mr. H while under Dr. Forster's care is uncertain, because years later, in 1933, Mr. H's secret police, the Gestapo, rounded up all psychiatric records related to Mr. H's treatment and destroyed them. Dr. Forster committed suicide in quotation marks in that same year. The mystery of what was done to Mr. H at Pacewalk is deepened by his own statements. According to him, he had experienced a vision from another world while at the hospital. In that vision, he was told that he would need to restore his sight so that he could lead Germany back to glory. His latent anti-Semitism, which had already been planted by his mystical readings in Vienna, emerged at Pacewalk. What did happen at that hospital? In a shrewd piece of detective work published in the journal History of Childhood Quarterly, psychohistorian Dr. Rudolf Binion suggests that Mr. H's visions may have been deliberately induced by the psychiatrist Edmund Forster as a means of helping Mr. H recover from his blindness. Mr. H's mystical beliefs were well known, and they would certainly have come out in his psychiatric interviews. Dr. Binion cites a book completed in 1939 entitled Der Augenzeuge, The Eyewitness, written by a J doctor named Ernst Weiss, who had fled Germany in 1933. In Der Augenzeuge, don't know if it's right, the author tells a thinly fictionalized story of a man, A.H., who is taken to Pacewalk Hospital for psychiatric care. A.H. claims that he had been hit by mustard gas. At Pacewalk, the psychiatrist in charge deliberately induces visionary ideas into the mind of the hysterical A.H. in order to effect a cure. The miracle cure is successful, and years later, in the summer of 1933, the psychiatrist attempts to send the records of the treatments abroad to keep them out of the hands of the Gestapo. Is Gestapo going to get me kicked off?
Just keep going.
Just keep going. We're sticking this all up on Rumble. Um, anyway, so in his article, Dr. Binion points out that Mr. H's psychiatrist, Edmund Forster, had been abroad in Paris that summer, and it is Dr. Binion's guess that Forster may have revealed the facts of Hitler's treatment to someone at that time, resulting in the book Der Orgensieg. Forster may have also been the person who revealed that two other very high-ranking nasties, Bernhard Rust, Prussian Minister of Education, and Hermann Goering, both had histories of severe mental problems. Rust was a certified psychopath and Goering was a former morphine addict. After Mr. H's discharge from Pay's Walk in November of 1918, he travelled back to Munich. He remained in the army, and in April of 1919 he was assigned to espionage duties. A communist revolution had just occurred in southern Germany, and a Soviet republic had been declared there after the regional government collapsed. Mr. H was one of the soldier spies selected to remain behind in Munich and circulate among the pro-communist soldiers to learn the identities and their leaders. When the German Reichswehr force from Berlin moved in and crushed the rebellion, Mr. H walked down the ranks of captured soldiers and singled out the ringleaders. The German soldiers, who were identified by Mr. H, were taken away for immediate execution without trial. Mr. H watched as many of his victims were put before the wall and shot. His stellar performance in Munich earned him a promotion. He was assigned to the highly secret political department of the Army District Command. Mr. H's new unit was an intelligence operation that engaged in acts of domestic terrorism. The unit refused to accept Germany's defeat in World War I, and so it assassinated some of the German leaders who had negotiated German surrender. A prominent leader of the district command was Captain Ernst Röhm. Röhm was a professional soldier who served as liaison between the district command and the German industrialists who were directly funding the district command to help it fight communism. I mean, who knows if any of this is true? Do you know what I mean? Who knows? Captain Röhm and many other members of the district command were members of a mystical organization known as the Thule Society. The Thule believed in the A super race, and it preached the coming of a German Messiah who would lead Germany to glory and a new A civilization. In Spear of Destiny, we learned from Dr. Stein that the Thule group was financed by some of the very same industrialists who supported the district command. The Thule was also directly supported by the German High Command. Many assassinations perpetrated by the district command may have been inspired by the Thule. According to Dr. Stein, the Thule was a society of assassins. It held secret courts and condemned people to death. It is likely that many victims murdered by the district command had been condemned earlier in the secret courts of the Thule. Many prominent Germans supported this violence and were documented members of the Thule. For example, the police president of Munich, Franz Gürtner, was a reported member of the innermost circle of the Thule. He later became Minister of Justice of the Third Reich. After joining the district command, Corporal A.H. became a good friend of Ernst Röhm. It was Röhm who took Mr. H. to see Dietrich Eckart, a morphine addict who headed the German Thule Society. Röhm had a purpose for arranging this meeting. He felt that Mr. H. had strong leadership potential and that he was the man the Thule was looking for. Eckart agreed, and Mr. H.'s career as the new German Messiah was launched. The vehicle used by Mr. H. to gain political power was a small socialist organisation known as the German Workers' Party. In September 1919, Mr. H. was sent by the district command to attend a meeting of the party. Mr. H. was subsequently invited by the party to join it, and within a year he became the party's leader. At a 1920 party rally held in a Munich beer hall, Mr. H. announced that the German Workers' Party was to be renamed the Nationalistische Deutsche Arbeit, or the, 'or the, or the, 'or the 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 ' In Mein Kampf, Mr. H stated that he had made an agonizing decision to quit the district command in order to participate in the German Workers' Party. Many historians strongly doubt that Mr. H had left the district command and believed instead that the German Workers' Party was the vehicle used by the district command to covertly further his political aims. There is good evidence to support this conclusion. Ernst Röhm, Mr. H's mentor in the district command, had already joined and started shaping the German Workers' Party before Mr. H became a member. Röhm greatly assisted Mr. H in transforming the German Workers' Party into Mr. H's political tool. I feel an idiot saying Mr. H, but that's what they've done to us. Rom grew with the fledgling Nasty Party and later became the leader of the Nasty SA organisation, better known as the Brown Shirts. Thor leader Dietrich Eckart, who was also closely affiliated with district command leaders, became the editor-in-chief of the Nasty newspaper, Volksschau Beobachter. Hitler, done it.
Maybe the
The R might have just scared the algorithms to death. Oh God, it's so difficult. Mr. H had by no means abandoned his district command friends. They were all in there turning the German Workers' Party into the Nasty Party. Although the Thule was probably the most important mystical organisation behind the formation of Nastyism, it was not the only one. Another was the Vril Society, which had been named after a book by Lord Bulwer Lytton, an English Rosicrucian. Lytton's book told the story of an A super race coming to Earth. One member of the German Vril was Professor Karl Haushofer, a former employee of German military intelligence. Haushofer had been a mentor to H, I'll just call him, as well as H's propaganda specialist Rudolf Hess. Hess had been an assistant to Haushofer at the University of Munich. Another real member was the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany, Heinrich Himmler, who became head of the dreaded SS and Gestapo. Himmler incorporated the Vril Society into the Nazi Occult Bureau. Yet another mystical group was the Edelweiss Society, which preached the coming of a Nordic Messiah. Okay, we've got a little footnote here. Rom eventually lost his political power when the SA was reduced and Himmler's SS organization rose to supremacy. Rom's usefulness to the Thule Society and to the German intelligence apparat was outlived by 1934 when nasty officers went to Rom's home to arrest him for allegedly conspiring to overthrow his former underling. H. Rom was reportedly found in his bedroom in a compromising position with one of his top aides. He was offered a chance to commit suicide, but he refused, so the nasties shot him in a Munich prison. It is interesting that Rom did not suspect the fate which awaited him because H had personally travelled to Munich to meet and escort him. H was a master at using other people's trust to betray them in extraordinarily treacherous ways. It was one of the methods used to send Jays and other undesirables to their deaths in Nazi slave labour camps, which is a story for another time. Nasty financial director Hermann Goering had become an active member of the Edelweiss Society in 1921 while living and working in Sweden. Goering believed H to be the Nordic Messiah. Nastyism was clearly more than a political movement. It was a powerful tool. Brotherhood faction steeped in brotherhood beliefs and symbols. The emblem chosen to represent the Nasty Party was the swastika, an important brotherhood symbol since antiquity. H was proclaimed not only a political messiah, but also a religious messiah, whose coming signaled the fulfillment of the apocalyptic philosophies espoused by German mystical groups. H's coming was to bring about the Thousand-Year Reich, a millennium in which mankind would be purified and reach its highest state of existence. Nastyism was a custodial religious philosophy as much as it was a political ideology. In his speech he gave at the Nasties' 1934 Nuremberg rally, H said about the party, "Its total image, however, will be like a holy order." Footnote. Nazis were not the only people involved in World War II for whom mysticism was important. Many top military leaders of Japan, which was allied to Germany, were members of a secret mystical society known for its black dragon symbol. In the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, a staunch anti-Nazi, was a Freemason, as was his successor, Harry S. Truman, who ordered the dropping of atomic bombs on two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, near the end of the war. The brutal Nasty Party as a holy order, the idea seems laughable in hindsight, until we note that this would not be the first time in history that a holy order was responsible for massive atrocities. The Dominicans who ran the Catholic Inquisition during the Middle Ages were another example. World War II lasted from 1939 until 1945. It took a terrible toll on human life. Much of that toll was the result of the Nazis' most horrific accomplishment, a massive German concentration camp system in which 11 million people died. 6 million of the victims were Jays. By that time in history, I might have to suspend comments on this one. My own comments, eh? By that time in history, concentration camps had become quite the fashion, beginning with the British in Africa, continuing with the Bolsheviks in Russia, and the American internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and sinking to their lowest levels of barbarity in nasty Germany. Most people know the nasty concentration camps for their gas chambers, grisly human experiments, and the deliberate starvation of inmates. The camps were a part of the nasty so-called final solution. The final solution was not just an attempt to racially purify the human race by physically exterminating all Jays and other undesirables. It was an effort to kill them in accordance with a grand economic plan. As in Russia, the nasty concentration camps were designed to be a vital part of the national economy. More than 300 camps were constructed in Germany alone. They call them FEMA camps these days. Many of them were located near large factories, especially designed to be run on the slave labour provided by the camps. The infamous Auschwitz camp, for example, was constructed next to an enormous industrial plant for processing and refining oil and rubber. The intent of the final solution was to destroy the A's, which are nasty sort of as human mutations. By reducing them to the lowest common denominator, camp inmates became expendable economic units forced to work to their maximum limit while slowly starving to death. After death, the physical components of their bodies were often used for other purposes. Gold tooth fillings were extracted and sent to the German treasury. Human hair was sometimes woven into blankets. Even human skin was fashioned into lampshades and other decorative items. The nasty concentration camp system reduced human beings quite literally to the level of livestock. Most of the concentration camp factories were operated by the giant German chemical combine IG Farben. In fact, one of Farben's subsidiaries manufactured the poison gas used in the concentration camp gas chambers. A remarkable book, The Crime and Punishment of IG Farben, by Joseph Borkin, documents how the Farben companies, in cooperation with the nasty SS, ran the concentration camps and adjacent factories as a business enterprise. Mr. Brokin's book reproduces a settlement of accounts made between IG Farben and the SS for the work of concentration camp inmates. The receipt is neatly handwritten with slave labour rates priced in a very businesslike fashion. When the war ended, all 24 top executives of IG Farben were charged with crimes against humanity at the Nuremberg war crime trials. The few Farben executives who were convicted of slavery and mass murder for their part in running the camp system were given very light sentences. Otto Ambrose, an expert on poison gas and a member of the IG Farben managing board, served only 8 years for his conviction. Heinrich Butefisch was sentenced to 6 years. After World War II, the IG Farben combine was restructured under different names, and remains an international giant to this day. The Nazi organisation, which oversaw the concentration camp system, was the Schutzstaffel SS. The SS was a ruthless military intelligence organisation run by a chicken farmer turned policeman named Heinrich Himmler. Himmler, like so many other top nasties, was a devotee of German mysticism. We noted his membership in the Vril Society earlier in this chapter. Himmler ran the SS, a secret society with initiations. SS members were taught a mystical tradition which included a catechism declaring that H had been sent to the German people by God. Mystical symbology was also taught, with a special emphasis on the occult meanings of the swastika. Himmler dreamed that the SS would build the foundation of the new A utopia. Those admitted into the SS were therefore only to be of the purest A stock. As an elite organisation, the SS had a great deal of autonomy. Although Himmler remained personally loyal to H out of a belief in H as the Messiah, a number of historians agree that in many aspects H was as powerful and certainly as feared as H. Himmler's dream was to create a fully independent nation in Burgundy, France, run entirely by the SS on SS principles. It was Himmler's goal to make the SS nation the envy of the world. The autonomy of the SS was also apparent from the direct funding of it by important German industries. One of those contributors was, of course, IG Farben. Others included the German subsidiaries of ITT and General Electric. As has been true earlier of the District Council, this direct funding enabled the SS to act outside the purse strings of the larger National Party. It also permitted the industrialists to have more direct influence into SS activities. Nazism and all of its atrocities could never have happened without the support of the German banking fraternity. Banking industry and government were as tightly interwoven in Nazi Germany as they are in nearly every nation today. In Germany, many bankers held management positions in other companies, not the least of which was IG Farben. For example, Max and Paul Warburg, who ran major banks in Germany and the United States, and who incidentally had been instrumental in establishing the Federal Reserve System in the United States, were IG Farben directors. H. A. Metz and IG Farben was a director of the Bank of Manhattan, which was a Warburg bank in the United States and that later became part of the Chase Manhattan Bank, managed by the Rockefeller family. Another Rockefeller company, Standard Oil of New Jersey, had been a cartel partner with IG Farben prior to the war. One director of American IG Farben was C. E. Mitchell, who was also director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and of National City Bank. Most significantly, Hermann Schmitz, president of IG Farben in Germany, had served on the boards of the Deutsche Bank and the Bank of International Settlements. As we recall, the Bank for International Settlements was the apex of the international central banking community and was interlocking inflatable paper money systems. Schmitz was one of the few IG Farben executives sentenced to a prison term at Nuremberg. He received a 10-year sentence. Perhaps the most surprising support for H in the international banking fraternity came from the director of the Bank of England, Montague Norman. England, of course, was an enemy of the nasty Germany during World War II. According to Dr. Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope, Mr. Norman was the commander-in-chief of the world system of banking control. During his governorship of the Bank of England from 1920 until 1944, said Dr. Quigley, many wealthy and influential persons like Montague Norman and Henry Dettering, owner of Shell Oil, directed public attention to the danger of Bolshevism while maintaining a neutral or favourable attitude towards Nazism. Montague Norman apparently felt more than mere neutrality towards Nazism, however, according to a Chicago paper story dated November 3rd, 1938. In the spring of 1934, a select group of city financiers gathered around Montague Norman in the windowless building of the Bank of England in Threadneedle Street. Among those present was Sir Alan Anderson, partner in Anderson, Green and Co., Lord then Sir Josiah Stamp, chairman of the LMS railway system, Edward Shaw, chairman of the P&O steamship lines, Sir Robert Kindersley, a partner in Hambros Brother, C.T. Tiax, head of the J. Schroeder Company. But now a new power was established on Europe's political horizon, namely nasty Germany. H had disappointed his critics. His regime was no temporary nightmare, but a system with a good future, and Mr. Norman advised his directors to include H in their plans. There was no opposition, and it was decided that H should get covert help from London's financial section until Mr. Norman had succeeded in putting sufficient pressure on the government to make it abandon its pro-French policy for a more promising pro-German orientation. The Bank of England continued to support H even after the nasty director embarked on his program of conquest. After After H invaded Czechoslovakia in violation of the non-aggression pact between then Prime Minister Chamberlain of England and H, the Bank of England gave nasty Germany £6 million of Czech gold reserves held by the bank. In the same way that a small clique of German petty princes had made a fortune from war in the 18th century by renting soldiers to warring nations, a small clique of banks and multinational corporations made a large profit by providing goods and services to both sides fighting in World War II. After giving early support to H, the Bank of England naturally provided loans to Britain to fight H, at the same time that the German subsidiaries of ITT and General Electric were given money to the SS and provided needed services to nasty Germany. Other branches in America and elsewhere were aiding Germany's enemies, as IG Farben fueled H's war machine in Germany. One of its old cartel partners, Standard Oil, fueled the Allied effort against Germany, while the Ford Motor Company produced materials for the American army to fight Germany. Ford plants in Germany were turning out military vehicles for the nasties. No matter who won the war, those banks and companies would profit and find favour with whoever emerged victorious. The overwhelming role that various bankers and industrialists played in propping up H and in building the nasty war machine has caused some historians to view those bankers and industrialists as the true powers behind nastyism. They were indeed highly significant, but were they actually the ultimate sources that gave us nastyism? As we have already noted, nastyism arose out of the mystical brotherhood network. Some researchers have erroneously concluded that the radical brotherhood organizations have been the tools of political, military, and economic leaders rather than vice versa. This mistake is usually made because few historians have dared consider that the brotherhood network has been senior in power and influence to human elites. Once that influence is acknowledged, one must then ask who is the power behind the brotherhood. We have, of course, already answered that question in a matter unacceptable to a great many people, members of an extraterrestrial race, i.e., the custodial society. Once we begin to take such an extraordinary possibility seriously, we must return our gaze to the pages of history for confirmation. In this case, to nasty Germany. When we do so, we discover something quite remarkable. The nasties themselves claimed that an extraterrestrial society was the source of their ideology and the power behind their organization. Throughout history, brotherhood organizations have been pledging ultimate loyalty to assorted gods, angels, cosmic beings, ascended masters from other planets, and similar non-terrestrials, nearly all of which appear to be custodians disguised by veils of myth. The Thor Society and nasty mysticism itself also claimed that its true leadership came from extraterrestrial sources. The nasties referred to their hidden extraterrestrial masters as underground supermen. H believed in the supermen and claimed that he had once met one of them, as did other members of the Thor leadership. The nasties said that their supermen lived beneath the Earth's surface and were the creators of the A race. A's therefore constituted the world's only pure race, and all other people were viewed as genetic mutations. The nasties planned to re-purify humanity by murdering everyone who was not an A. Top nasty leaders believed that the underground supermen would return to the surface of the earth to rule it as soon as the nasties began their racial purification program and established the Thousand-Year Reich. These nasty beliefs are very similar to other custodial religions, which teach people to prepare for the future return of supernatural or superhuman beings who will reign over a utopian earth. As in other custodial religions, the coming of the nasty supermen would coincide with the great final divine judgment. Of the divine judgment H had declared in court during his early nasty days. The nasty army we have formed is growing from day to day. I nourish the proud hope that one day the hour will come when these rough companies will grow into battalions, the battalions to regiments, the regiments to divisions, that the old cockade, ribbon or rosette worn on hat as a badge, will be taken from the mud, that the old flags will wave again, and there will be a reconciliation at the last great divine judgment which we are prepared to face. It would seem that the nasty supermen were not extraterrestrials at all, but were earthly in origin, because they allegedly hailed from beneath our planet's surface. However, H and his mystical compatriots had a curiously inverted view of the universe. To their way of thinking, the universe consists of infinite rock, which is broken by numerous hollow areas. In other words, the universe is like an infinite piece of Swiss cheese, solid with many holes in it. The concave surfaces of the hollow areas are the surfaces of planets, including Earth. Humans are therefore not living on the outer surface of the round ball, they are being pushed by gravity against the inner surface of a hollow area. According to the nasties, the sun hangs suspended in the middle of a low hollow area. The sky is made of blue gas, and the stars are tiny objects, perhaps ice crystals, which hang suspended in a similar fashion to the sun. In this infinite Swiss cheese universe of stone, there are many fissures and cracks that allow travel between the hollow areas. In the adjoining hollow area, according to nastyism, lives the race of A supermen. H's underground supermen were therefore true extraterrestrials, but in a curiously inverted fashion. Lest it be assumed that the nasty Swiss cheese model of the universe was one of H's big lies, there is evidence that the nasty leadership took the idea quite seriously. For example, an attempt was made to locate the British fleet during World War II with infrared rays pointing toward the sky. The nasties believe that the rays would hit the opposite side of the concave, Earth. If for no other reason, we can be glad the nasties lost the war so that we were spared their astronomy lessons. It is unfortunate that the Nazi defeat and reported deaths of AH and Heinrich Himmler did not end nasty influence in the world. After World War II, Nazis participated in many important spheres of activity. The American Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, accepted the offer of Reinhard Gehlen, Chief of Russian Intelligence Operations in the Nasty Secret Service, to help build the American intelligence network in Europe after the war. Gehlen. Gehlen. Gehlen's organization was staffed by many former SS members. The Gehlen organization became a significant element of the CIA in Western Europe, and it also provided the foundation for the intelligence apparat of modern West Germany. The CIA also extracted information about nasty psychiatric techniques from Nuremberg war crime trial records for use in the CIA's infamous mind control experiments decades later. Interpol, the private international police organization, which is supposed to combat international criminals and drug traffickers, was headed by former nasty SS officers several times up until 1972. This is not surprising when we consider that Interpol was controlled by the nasties during World War II. Prince Bernhard of the House of Orange in the Netherlands had been a member of the SS before the war, followed by a stint as an employee of IG Farben. He then married into the House of Orange and assumed his position as chairman of Shell Oil. Prince Bernhard founded the International Bilderberg meetings, which are still held every year. The Bilderberg meetings are meant to be informal get-togethers of the top world's bankers, industrialists, political figures, and other prominent people for the purpose of discussing world conditions and reaching an occasional informal consensus. Prince Bernhard personally chaired these meetings until 1976, when a corruption scandal forced him to resign. To younger people today, World War II is an episode from the distant past, much as World War I is ancient history to people in their 30s and 40s. The conflict most young people understand now is the former Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union. World War II did much to set the stage for that confrontation. During World War II, Russia was an ally of the United States, Great Britain and France in the war against nasty Germany. Russian troops fought against the Germans in many of the Balkan nations which bordered Russia. In the ensuing instability, communist movements gained considerable power in those Balkan countries, and Russian troops remained there after the Germans were defeated. The Allies were not about to prolong the war, turning against the Soviet Union until the communist Eastern Bloc was born. The nasty experience is an extraordinarily important one because it happened within the lifetime of a great many people living today. Incredibly, nasty groups have been revived in America, Germany, and other nations. It is hard to imagine that anyone would join a movement of such proven madness, yet it is happening. The German Nazi experience revealed to us that the world is still being pushed into war, ignorance, and repeated genocides in the same manner that it has been for thousands of years, by a mystical network with organizations pledging ultimate loyalty to an extraterrestrial race. The nasty experience revealed again a key channel through which Brotherhood network influence has been exerted, namely through a community of national intelligence organizations whose activities are kept secret by law and whose activities are often outside of the law. Nazism was but another brutal fashion set up in opposition to so many other factions which arose out of the Brotherhood's network. This helped guarantee more war, more suffering, and the continued imprisonment of mankind on a small planet behind walls of ignorance. In Nazism, we saw all of the elements we have looked at in this book come together: the Brotherhood network, apocalypticism, a paper money banking elite, genocide, and an extraterrestrial race worshipped as gods and owners of Earth. Nazism, bit like what's happening now then. Nazism should have happened 2,000 years ago, but it occurred only decades ago. All of the history we have looked at in this book may still be happening today. Yeah, it is. These closing observations require us to look once again at the UFO phenomenon itself. If we hypothesize that human society is still being manipulated by a custodial society in the same manner that it was thousands of years ago, then we must determine that UFOs continue to behave now as they did in the distant past. Two questions we might pose to make this determination are UFOs still spreading the same corrupted brotherhood mysticism today as they did earlier in history? Are they still implanting the false idea that they are God? If we are to believe the testimony of recent UFO abductees, the answer to both is yes. Well, that is one that's going to cause a debate, isn't it?